Hi, it's Govinda Singh 1984. This vlog is going to be about social media, politics. Now, people use social media, sites such as Facebook, for many different reasons. Now, people who have social lives, who are a large group of friends or small group of friends who are socially active, their purpose and their reasons for using social media will differ from someone who's been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. I've been sectioned under the Mental Health Act twice, and so what seems weird and odd to someone who has no knowledge of the mental health environment is when you constantly post blogs about politics, and some people become uneasy. They think it's weird, they think it's not the place. But people have the freedom to post their social lives, so if someone has a political view, they should also have the freedom to post their political views. So some people use Facebook for their activism. Now, a lot of people going to mental hospital, when they come out, it's not really considered, it's not like shocking that when you come out of mental hospital that you have an interest in politics. You're politically awoken, you're awakened politically, and some of us feel we're on some missions to, share knowledge and raise awareness regarding injustices that are going around the world. So it's not really shocking in the mental health world that someone posts constantly about politics. But I wanted to talk about colonial history. Now, some people have got the impression that I hate white people, that I'm racist towards white people because I posted lots about colonial times. Now, when we were younger in Indian households, when our grandparents would teach us about atrocities that were committed by the British colonial Raj during the colonial times, the language that is used is the Gore. The Gore did this in India. Now, Gore means white person, the white people. So when you grow up in a household where you are taught the white people did this in India, the atrocities that were committed by the white people, you will get this generalization of the white race as being responsible. So as I grew older, I wanted to know exactly who were responsible for all these colonial atrocities, not just in India, but Aboriginal Australia, First Nations Canada, Indigenous Americas, Africa and China. And so it all started when I was psychotic. I used to watch Prime Minister's Questions every day religiously, and it taught me a lot about just the procedure and the format, the way things go on in the House of Commons in London, in Westminster. And so in Britain you have the House of Commons and you have the House of Lords. Now in the House of Commons you have the House Speaker in the centre. On one side you have the ruling party benches, and on the other side of the House you have the opposition party benches. So when I researched when power was transferred from the indigenous princely states in India to the Victorian crown, I would match the dates of when atrocities or famines or shootings or mutinies took place, and I would match it with which royal household was in power or and which political party was in power. So during the atrocities in 1848, 1857 and in the 18th century basically, the royal household that was reigning was the House of Hanover. Now the House of Hanover is of German descent, German origins, and that was Queen Victoria's house. And she was the monarch, she was the crown of that era. And the political parties that were in power and ruling were the ruling parties in government in the House of Commons that were making the decisions regarding policies within Britain or externally around the empire, was a mix between the Liberal Party and the Conservative Tory Party. And so that's when my mind started calming down, and I was like, hang on a minute. So the Labour Party, the British old Labour Party, it didn't come to be until the 19th century, until the 1900s. So when all these mutinies were taking place and all these suppressions of mutinies and famines were taking place, the royal household that was in reigning was the House of Hanover, the Queen Victoria House of Hanover, and it was a mix in government between the Liberal Party and the British Tory Party. And so I started thinking, be more specific. Don't use the language such as the white devils did this, the Gore, the white people did this, or the British, because it generalizes a whole population. And a whole population cannot be represented by one political party when there's opposition parties. So I would word my blogs and make it very clear that I'm speaking out against the far right Europeans, not the left wing Europeans. And I'm specific with the colonial political party that was in power during the atrocities around the Commonwealth. So it's being just more specific. So we as British migrants, British Indians or British Punjabis, or we can sit side by side with the Labour Party, the British Labour Party, and we can talk colonial history. And we can make very clear, during the colonial times, the Victorian House of Hanover, Queen Victoria's house, and the Liberal Party and the British Tory Party that were empowered during the colonial times did some very disgusting, horrible things to people of colour. Whether it was in Africa, whether it was in Aboriginal Australia, whether it was in First Nations Canada, or whether it was in India. Even the Boxer Chinese in China were beheaded because they opposed Victorianization of their country. And they were beheaded. They're known as the Boxer Rebellions. There were the Opium Wars. There was Jallianwala Bagh. There's the Bengal Famine. Well, the Bengal Famine was in 1943, but there were many famines. And there was a lot of racism and Holocaust based on far-right racism. Now, when I make it very clear that I'm speaking out against the colonial British party, I've had people who I've gone to school with when I was in high school who are white, who are saying to me I'm being racist, that I must hate white people, when I've made it very clear which house and which party and which right-wing racists and white supremacists that I'm objecting to and speaking out against. And I was told in a very rude way, the white fella said to me, we want to learn about British history, yeah? Not what happened in India, we learn about British history. And we're about here and now. We don't want to know what happened back then, we want to know about here and now. And I think that's very racist, because people have a minute's silence for the Jewish Holocaust in the 1940s. Now, in 1943, there was a Bengal famine that is the result of British Tory Party colonial policy. And we're told that we have to get over it. We have to move on. But then a Tory, a right-wing conservative, can sit and remember something from the same era in the 1940s and remember it and have a minute's silence. Why do we have to get over Holocaust and genocide that happened in the same era as other incidents around the world at the same time, but we have to get over it as people of colour? But him, as a right-wing Conservative Party follower, can sit down, remember it and praise it as one of their most favourite wartime heroes and one of their most bestest moments in their history. So I think that's a bit of double standards. And so that's it really. I'm not a racist. I'm not racist at all. The OSNST, Old South or New South Town Company, we don't discriminate against people based on their race, their religion or their non-religion, their sexuality, their gender, whether they're LGBT. We don't persecute or oppress people for any reason whatsoever. We simply speak out against injustices and exploitation and suffering. And that's it. So, as a British Punjabi, I'm within my rights to talk about colonial history. And when I weigh on the scale what the British Raj, what the British colonial Tory Raj, the Tory party that was in power when all those things were going on, what the Tory Raj did on one side of the scale, And not just in India, in Boxer China, in Aboriginal Australia, in Africa, and in the indigenous Americas such as First Nations Canada. And then you put the the National Socialist Workers' Party, the neo-Nazis on the other side of the scale. And you just weigh up what was going on around the world at that time, at that moment in history. It's, hang on, it's basically saying, no, Hitler, don't do that. You can't do that. Stop that, Hitler. But what you can do everything